A world-famous bakery, a slice of pie that looked perfect. But one bite changed everything. The founder, disguised and unannounced, tasted something so wrong, it shattered decades of trust in seconds. What he uncovered wasn't just a bad batch. It was a full-blown food fraud, hidden behind fake ingredients and forged supplier deals. Staff laughed, customers were fooled, but the man who built the brand from scratch wasn't about to let it slide. He didn't file a complaint. He launched a crusade. And what happened next shook an entire industry. Stay with us, because this pie was only the beginning. Jackson Hart wasn't visiting this bakery by chance. He was here with purpose, with history in his hands and fire in his gut. The Golden Hearth Bakery in Scranton had once been a shining beacon in the family empire he built from flour and faith, a brand that stood for warmth, honesty, and home. But now, something was off, and it started with the numbers. Too clean, too good, too quiet. No complaints, no losses, just perfect profit margins that raised red flags only he seemed to notice. So, one crisp afternoon, Jackson walked into the Scranton branch as any other customer might. No badge, no announcement, just a man in jeans and a button-down shirt who knew exactly what his pie was supposed to taste like. He always had. His mother had taught him that good pie didn't just come from good apples. It came from care, from love, from people who respected the work. He handed over a $10 bill and asked softly for one thing, a slice of the classic apple pie, the flagship item, the beating heart of the brand. The cashier called out 42, and Jackson took his tray without a word, heading to a quiet booth by the window, back straight, ears open. The plate held a golden slice that looked nearly perfect. Lattice crust, slightly caramelized, a swirl of glaze atop a scoop of vanilla bean ice cream, melting slowly by its side. He didn't touch it right away. Instead, he watched. Customers came and went. Staff moved like shadows, barely engaging, barely aware. Then came a voice from the kitchen, a whisper, smug and low. "They're old. Half of them can't even taste the difference." Laughter followed. Casual, cruel, careless. Jackson's jaw clenched. He picked up his fork. The crust cracked gently as he pressed through, but the filling that emerged wasn't right. It slumped outward in a glossy, artificial ooze. He leaned closer. No layers, no slices, just syrupy mush that reeked of canned shortcuts and synthetic sugar. He took a bite. The taste confirmed everything. Metallic aftertaste. Cloying sweetness. Zero warmth. It wasn't just a bad slice of pie. It was a lie served on a company plate. A betrayal wrapped in crust. Jackson had tasted that recipe 1,000 times, and this wasn't it. He'd stood in kitchens since he was 27, layering apple slices by hand, perfecting the balance between tart and sweet, crisp and tender. This imposter of a dessert had no business being sold under his family's name. And then, tucked under the corner of the plate, half hidden beneath a napkin, he found it. A small printed label, meant for internal use. Product? Apple pie filling, Liberty Orchard Imports. His eyes narrowed. Liberty Orchard wasn't on the approved supplier list. In fact, it wasn't even in the system. Golden Hearth only worked with 2 trusted farms, family-run operations that guaranteed fresh, locally sourced fruit. Every franchisee knew this. Everyone had signed the agreement, the training packet, the supplier list printed in bold. There were no substitutions, no shortcuts. The agreement wasn't just policy, it was gospel. Jackson's pulse slowed. He didn't yell, he didn't make a scene, he just sat there, one man and one pie, surrounded by silence and pretense. He looked around the room again. The promo screen above the counter played a faded ad from last season, frozen in loop. A worker by the drink station struggled to refill the ice while texting one-handed. The laughter from the back returned, this time about how the canned stuff actually saves more than 30 cents per slice. Jackson rose slowly, plate in hand, and walked toward the kitchen. Staff parted without question, assuming he was just a confused customer. In the back, he spotted the manager's office, a frosted glass door with a clipboard tacked to the side. Inside, invoices spilled across the desk. Jackson didn't hesitate. He opened the door and stepped in. Stacks of purchase orders, unfiled delivery slips, and bulk order forms bore the same name. Liberty Orchard. No attempt to hide it. No effort to mask the fraud. This wasn't a mistake. It was a system, a method, a lie baked right into the supply chain. This wasn't about one bad shift or one lazy teenager. It was a business model, one built on betting that nobody who truly cared would ever show up and check. But Jackson had shown up, and he cared deeply. He photographed every document, scanned the receipts, backed everything up to the cloud. This wasn't just theft, it was sabotage of the very legacy he'd spent his life building. As he turned to leave, his phone buzzed. His VP of Operations, Dana. She'd been helping him monitor this store from HQ. "How's the pie?" she texted. Jackson replied with one word: fake. A pause, then her response lit up the screen. "Liberty Orchard isn't in our system." He nodded slowly, not surprised, just saddened. Because now he knew this wasn't isolated. This wasn't just Scranton. This was bigger. And if he was right, a quiet rot was spreading across the franchise, hidden beneath golden crusts and melted scoops of vanilla. All of it banking on the hope that the founder would never taste it himself. But he did. And now the reckoning had begun. The moment Jackson Hart tucked that supplier slip into his pocket, he knew this wasn't just about one slice of pie gone wrong. It was about a franchise unraveling beneath the weight of shortcuts and silence. And as he leaned back in that booth, staring through the smudged display glass and hollow-eyed staff, he saw it all. The apathy, the neglect, the quiet rot that spreads when no one thinks the boss will show up. And now that he had, it was time to dig deep. Not undercover, not in secret, but as the man whose name built every oven, every recipe, and every damn storefront with pride and purpose. So without hesitation, he stood up, left his tray untouched, and walked straight through the store with eyes that scanned every floor. The flickering menu screen looping last season's promotions, the teenager at the soda machine texting while ice spilled onto the floor. The way not one employee greeted a new customer who walked in behind him. And what hit hardest wasn't the laziness, it was the culture that allowed it to fester. The complete absence of soul in a place that was once a beacon of comfort food and family warmth. And as he pushed through the swinging doors into the back prep area, ignoring the confused looks and half-hearted, "Sir, you can't be back here," Jackson marched toward the frosted office door labelled "Authorized Personnel Only." Because, damn it, if anyone was authorized, it was him. This was his empire, his standard, his legacy on the chopping block. And what he found inside confirmed every suspicion and more. A cluttered desk piled with outdated receipts, a whiteboard scrawled with half-erased numbers, and right there in plain sight, dozens of bulk purchase orders for Liberty Orchard Imports, the rogue supplier, the off-brand filler that turned a handcrafted slice of apple pie into something barely fit for a vending machine. And as he flipped through those invoices, the pattern was obvious. Regular shipments, cost-saving substitutions, and not a single record flagged in corporate systems, which meant someone had intentionally bypassed the checks, likely falsified inventory, cooked the books just enough to stay under the radar, and banked on no one noticing. But Jackson did. And now his mind was moving faster than his hands, snapping photos, sorting documents, capturing everything, because this wasn't a mistake. It was a strategy, a calculated risk to cut costs and boost profits by feeding loyal customers synthetic garbage under the mask of tradition. And that betrayal ran deeper than business. It was personal. And while the staff outside chuckled and coasted through their shifts, Jackson saw the real numbers. Quarterly supply costs down 32%, gross margins up 18%, and yet no complaint. Tickets, no negative reviews, which meant customers either didn't notice or didn't care. Or worse, someone was deleting the evidence before it reached headquarters, and that sent a chill down his spine, because this wasn't just a product problem. It was a franchise cancer. And when Dana, his no-nonsense VP of Field Operations, texted back with confirmation that Liberty Orchard wasn't on any approved supplier list, he knew it wasn't isolated. This was bigger, wider, systemic. And as he called her and relayed what he'd found, she went silent, then said, "Jackson, we're seeing the same supplier show up in 4 other locations, all in the same region." And just like that, the Scranton franchise became ground zero in what was quickly becoming a brand-wide emergency. Because if fake ingredients were spreading and nobody was blowing the whistle, it meant fear or complacency had taken root. And neither had a place in Golden Hearth. So Jackson turned to the rusted filing cabinet and yanked it open. Inside, outdated training manuals, health inspection reports that looked forged, even a stack of unreported refund slips, and tucked between them, a printed email thread from a regional manager who'd warned about the quality months ago, only to be dismissed with a chilling line from the franchise owner, "Don't worry, no one can tell the difference." And that was the moment the whole picture clicked into place. This wasn't a lapse, it was a quiet coup against quality. A betrayal built on arrogance. And as Jackson backed up the documents to a secure corporate drive, he felt the weight of it pressing down. The years of hard work, the legacy he'd built with his own hands, now compromised by people who saw his life's work as just another line item to squeeze. And he wasn't going to stand for it. Not now, not ever. Because at Golden Hearth, every ingredient had a name. Every recipe had a history, and every slice told a story, and this story was turning bitter by the minute. So he stood up, straightened his back, and prepared for the confrontation to come. Because what started with a single bite had now unraveled into a web of deceit stretching across state lines, and Jackson Hart was ready to burn it down and rebuild it clean. One truth, one audit, and one honest pie at a time. Jackson Hart walked with quiet purpose toward the back of the bakery, his footsteps slow but deliberate, as though each step dragged behind it the weight of everything he'd just uncovered. A counterfeit pie, an apathetic team, a shameless supplier. And now, as he approached the door marked "Authorized Personnel Only," he didn't pause, didn't knock, didn't ask for permission, because in truth he didn't need any. He had built this company from the floor up, with floured hands and sleepless nights, and the fact that this place had his logo on the window meant he was more authorized than anyone to walk through that door and uncover exactly what was poisoning his legacy from the inside out. So he pushed it open and stepped into the dim, cluttered office where the truth had been hiding in plain sight for far too long. It smelled of stale coffee and microwave dinners. An odour that didn't belong in a place that was supposed to be the heartbeat of a wholesome, handcrafted bakery. And as Jackson scanned the room, his eyes settled instantly on the mess of papers strewn across the metal desk, a disorder that would have driven any corporate inspector to raise a dozen red flags before they even picked up the first sheet. But Jackson wasn't there to critique aesthetics. He was there to find evidence, and it didn't take long. The first invoice he picked up bore the name he had come to loathe in just the past few hours: Liberty Orchard Imports. And it wasn't a one-off. There were dozens more, stacked, clipped, even thumbtacked to a corkboard with pride, as though this illegal partnership was not only accepted, but flaunted. Bulk orders of pie filling, fruit substitute packs, crust mix labelled as expedited economy grade, and all of it dated and signed without so much as a forged alias. This wasn't a covert operation. This was a systematic, deliberate betrayal, and every invoice Jackson flipped over was another dagger to the ribs. He found delivery schedules, internal memos, cost analyses that highlighted the profit margins achieved by using Liberty Orchard instead of Golden Hearth's verified suppliers. And the numbers were damning: cheap to buy, fast to process, easy to disguise with enough sugar and glaze. And someone here had decided those superficial benefits were worth more than the authenticity customers trusted. Jackson reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and began photographing everything. The documents on the desk, the invoices in the drawers, even the torn open boxes still sitting in the corner, marked LOI in bold block letters. He wasn't angry anymore, not the kind of anger that makes you shout or break things. He was the kind of angry that settles cold in your gut, the kind that tightens every muscle and sharpens your focus like a blade. Because this wasn't just fraud. It was strategic fraud, built into the day-to-day operations of a place that pretended to represent his values. Then the desk phone rang, an old beige corded thing that rattled against the wood as it buzzed. Jackson stared at it for a second before picking up, unsure who on the other end could possibly deepen this disaster further. "This is Hart," he said flatly, not caring any more about masks or mystery. The voice on the other end was Dana's, sharp, focused, loyal. "Jackson," she said without preamble, "we've got a problem. You were right. Liberty Orchard's popping up in 4 other locations. I cross-referenced invoices. Same supplier, same lies." Jackson closed his eyes for a moment and let the words settle like ash. What he feared was now fact. This wasn't a lone franchisee trying to cut corners. This was a coordinated rot spreading across multiple cities, maybe more, and each location represented not just a business risk, but a betrayal of every customer who had walked in expecting warmth and gotten wax instead. "Start the audits," he said, his voice steady but urgent. "Flag every store in the region. Get legal on standby." Dana didn't argue. She knew the drill. As the call ended, Jackson turned back to the chaos around him and opened the filing cabinet. Its rusted drawer squealed open to reveal more evidence. Signed check copies, unsigned inspection forms, even emails printed out on company letterhead with phrases like "streamline inventory" and "no need to involve corporate." And the more he found, the clearer the picture became. The franchise owner, possibly more, had conspired to rewrite the rules and gamble that the name Golden Hearth was strong enough to withstand the decay beneath it. But what they didn't count on was the man behind the name still caring, still showing up unannounced, still tasting every bite like it was the first, still refusing to let his brand be eroded by greed. Jackson loaded everything onto a flash drive. Photos, scans, even a few video clips of the storage room stacked with non-approved ingredients, and sent them to a secure server with a timestamp and digital watermark. He wasn't just preparing for a confrontation now. He was building a case, assembling a wall of truth that no excuse could climb over. As he backed up the last batch of files, his eyes landed on a framed quote on the office wall. "Success is consistency over time." Ironic, because nothing about what he saw here resembled consistency unless you counted consistently bad decisions, consistently deceptive practices, and a consistent willingness to ruin something beautiful for a few extra bucks. He took a breath and stepped back, surveying the room once more, not just as an office, but as a crime scene, and just like that, the full gravity of it hit him. This wasn't just about a bad pie, it was about a fractured chain of trust from supplier to store to customer, and every link needed mending. Because if he didn't fix this now, Golden Hearth would become just another company that lost its soul chasing spreadsheets, and that was a legacy he'd never allow, not on his watch, not in his name. An hour later, the air in the back office was thick with anticipation. Every surface Jackson had touched now bore the silent weight of truth. And the pie slice, that single, treacherous slice of artificial filling and fraudulent crust, sat untouched on the desk like a loaded gun waiting to be fired. The door creaked open slowly, and in walked the franchise owner, middle-aged, confident, unaware. He moved like a man who had no idea the floor beneath him was about to collapse. He had the swagger of someone who thought they were running a tight ship, someone who had smoothed over enough complaints and padded enough spreadsheets to believe they were untouchable. Jackson didn't move. He stayed in the corner of the room, still wearing the hoodie, still anonymous for one final minute. The franchisee glanced around, confused, eyeing the documents scattered across the desk, but said nothing. He dropped his keys, took his seat, cracked his knuckles, and looked up, only then noticing the slice of pie sitting in the centre of the desk like a quiet challenge. "What's this?" he asked, gesturing toward it. Jackson didn't answer right away. He stepped forward slowly, his presence heavy, deliberate, and said calmly, "Taste it." The man blinked, hesitant. "Excuse me?" Jackson didn't repeat himself, just stared. The owner shrugged, reached forward, broke off a piece with the plastic fork resting beside it, and took a bite. He chewed, he smirked. "It's fine," he said with a shrug, as though that was the end of it, as though fine was good enough, as though fine could represent the legacy of Golden Hearth. That was the moment Jackson took off the baseball cap, and then the hood. His face fully visible now, familiar in every newsletter, every leadership photo, every company training video from the past 15 years. The franchisee's face drained of colour. His eyes widened, his fork stopped mid-air. "No," Jackson said, cold and clear. "It's not fine, and neither is this franchise." The room seemed to shrink. The silence was suffocating. Jackson stepped closer and began laying down the stack of documents one by one. The Liberty Orchard invoices, the falsified cost reports, the email printouts, the failed inspection forms, the refund slips that were never sent to HQ, and finally, the regional order summaries that proved this wasn't just a one-store issue. "You broke protocol," Jackson began, each word sharp as a blade. "You violated the supplier agreement. You ignored every single standard this brand stands for. And for what? A few extra percentage points on your margin?" The franchisee stumbled, verbally and physically, trying to stand, to explain, to claw his way out of the storm now crashing down on him. I didn't know the staff switched suppliers without clearing it. I thought it was just temporary. There were supply chain issues. I didn't approve." But Jackson raised a hand and the excuses died mid-sentence. "Don't," he said, quiet and deadly. "Don't insult me. Don't insult yourself. And don't insult this brand by pretending this wasn't deliberate." The franchisee collapsed back into his chair, the full weight of what was happening settling on his shoulders like a stone slab. "We gave you a brand," Jackson said, "a name customers trust, a menu tested and perfected over years, a framework of quality built on transparency and care. And you gambled with it. You gambled with my name." The pie slice between them now looked poisonous. The owner tried again, desperate now, throwing darts in the dark. "Listen, it's not as bad as it looks. I was going to fix it, get back on the original suppliers next quarter." But Jackson cut him off. "Stop. Just stop." Then he opened his tablet and played a video, security footage from earlier that day, showing staff unloading a shipment of Liberty Orchard boxes, joking around in the back, clearly aware of what they were handling. Then he flipped to the dashboard Dana had just updated. Real-time reports showing Liberty Orchard entries at 5 different locations. "You think this is isolated?" Jackson asked. "You think you're the only one?" His voice grew louder now, less calm, more fire. "This isn't just about a bad pie or lazy inventory management or even poor leadership." His voice grew louder now, less calm, more fire. "This isn't just about a bad pie or lazy inventory management or even poor leadership. This is about betrayal. This is about lying to the very people who walk through those doors expecting something warm, something real, something that tastes like the recipe my grandmother wrote in pencil 60 years ago, and you gave them mass-produced sludge in a plastic shell." The franchisee's face was wet now. Sweat. Maybe tears, maybe both. He muttered something about pleading his case, about being given a second chance, but Jackson had already reached into his folder and slid across a letter. Official, corporate, signed, and notarized. "You're done here," he said, final and absolute. "Effective immediately, Golden Hearth will be ceasing operations of this location. Your franchise rights are revoked. Your region is under full audit, and your accounts are frozen pending legal review." The man stared at the paper as though it were a death sentence. Maybe in some ways it was. "You can't," he began, But even he didn't believe it. Jackson stood up, took one last look at the office that had become a monument to everything Golden Hearth was never supposed to be, and turned toward the door. "This isn't just business," he said over his shoulder. "This is personal." Then he walked out, past the break room, past the staff who suddenly stood a little straighter, past the customers who unknowingly had come within inches of a scam, past the counter where that fake pie had first been served, and outside, as the sun dipped low behind the parking lot and the flashing open sign buzzed faintly in the window, Jackson knew this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning of a reckoning for everyone who thought quality could be faked, tradition could be replaced, and legacy could be bought cheap. Because Golden Hearth wasn't just a logo, it was a promise. And from this day forward, Jackson Hart would make sure that promise was honoured in every crust, every filling, every slice, and that anyone who tried to fake it would be burned by the truth. Within 48 hours, the shockwave rippled across every corner of the Golden Hearth empire like a thunderclap cracking through a quiet valley. Emails surged. Regional managers whispered in phone calls behind closed doors. Franchise owners locked themselves in offices, poring over supplier contracts. And even the interns at corporate headquarters in Chicago walked a little straighter, a little quieter, because the word had gotten out, not through some glossy PR campaign or sugar-coated press release, but through the brutal clarity of action. Scranton was shut down, cold, its lights turned off and doors bolted, while a team of auditors, trainers and chefs swarmed the premises with clipboards and checklists, peeling back every layer of the betrayal, like archaeologists unearthing something ancient and rotten beneath the surface of something that once looked beautiful. Jackson Hart didn't gloat. He didn't hold a press conference or strut through headquarters like a man who'd won a battle. He stayed mostly silent, watchful, active, decisive, because for him, this wasn't about flexing power. It was about restoring it. Dana was everywhere at once, her phone buzzing constantly as she coordinated with legal, operations, and regional compliance officers to dig into every other franchise, with even a whiff of inconsistency. No location was spared. Not Boston, not Reno, not Tulsa, not even the crown jewel flagship store in Seattle. Everyone got the same memo, one that didn't mince words. Effective immediately, a full review of ingredient sourcing, staff training, and operational integrity will be conducted. Any deviation from Golden Hearth's supplier agreement or product authenticity will result in temporary closure and possible franchise termination. No signatures. No warm corporate jargon, just the authority of truth echoing from the top down. And in the middle of it all, while the corporate machinery kicked into full gear, while texts between regional directors read like confessions and bakery staff across the country nervously looked at their pie shelves, wondering if they were next, Jackson Hart was in a test kitchen with flour on his hands and a knife slicing slowly through a freshly baked apple pie. Not because there were cameras watching, not because he wanted to make a statement, but because when the soul of your business has been bruised, sometimes the only way to begin healing it is to return to where it all began. The warmth of the crust, the texture of hand-sliced apples, the aroma of real cinnamon and brown sugar wafting through the air like a promise kept. That was what Jackson needed to taste again. Not the lie he'd bitten into in Scranton, but the truth he built with his bare hands and a battered family recipe notebook 2 decades ago. And so, when the time came, when the fires of crisis had cooled just enough for clarity to rise, Jackson didn't hide behind a legal team or pass off a pre-written memo through the marketing department. He stood in front of a single camera in the exact kitchen where it all started, wearing the same white apron he'd worn in the early days when he used to bake through the night and deliver pies himself to the farmer's market by sunrise. He didn't wear a suit. He didn't use a teleprompter. He didn't need to. The world didn't need polish. It needed truth, and truth was exactly what he gave them. "Golden Hearth," he said, looking directly into the lens, was never just a business. It's a bond between us and you, the families who come in for pie after soccer games, the teachers who bring a box to the faculty lounge, the couples who've shared a slice on their first dates and anniversaries. That bond is built on trust, and trust is built on honesty, real ingredients, real effort, real care. So let me say this clearly. Golden Hearth will never cut corners. Not while my name's still on the box. He picked up a single slice of pie, perfectly golden, the crust gently cracking as he pressed the fork into it. The apples glistened, not with syrupy filler, but with hand-brushed glaze. He took a bite, closed his eyes, and nodded once. Then the camera cut. No music, no slogan, just sincerity. The video was uploaded directly to the company's website and cross-posted to every social platform. And what followed wasn't viral in the way marketing teams usually chase. It was something deeper. Thousands of comments poured in. Some from loyal customers sharing stories of how Golden Hearth pies had comforted them in hospital rooms, weddings, funerals, or even lonely nights when all they needed was something warm. Others from former employees proud to say they'd been part of something real. And yes, some from critics who admitted they'd lost faith but were willing to look again. And slowly, as the story spread, covered not just in business news, but by food blogs, ethics podcasts, and even late-night monologues, the tide shifted. What started as a scandal became a turning point. Internally, Jackson and Dana didn't let up. They launched a new initiative called Back to the Hearth, which required every franchisee, no matter how long they'd been with the company, to complete a 3-day recertification on sourcing, prep, and baking fundamentals. They brought in original chefs, even retirees, to lead the training. Stores that passed got a special badge on their window. Certified Golden. Those that didn't were closed until they did. Customers noticed. Sales dipped slightly in the short term, but then rose slowly, steadily, with more authenticity than ever before. Yelp reviews became stories, not ratings. I saw the manager making crust from scratch. The apples tasted like my grandmother's. You can feel the difference. The staff felt it too, because when leadership leads by example, when they're willing to get their hands dirty and defend the mission without apology, that energy trickles down to every shift. One young employee from the Dallas location even started a TikTok trend showing their daily prep routine. Real butter, real flour, real joy. It got 2.5 million views. When you bake it right, you don't need a filter, the caption read. Jackson saw it, and he smiled. But he didn't celebrate. Not yet, because he knew standards aren't set in moments of crisis. They're forged in what comes after, in the discipline of consistency, the courage to say no to shortcuts, and the humility to revisit your roots even when success tempts you to forget them. That's why he added a new plaque to every Golden Hearth store, a single brass plate mounted above the oven, engraved with just 8 words. The truth is always baked into the crust. It was subtle. Some customers never even noticed, but the ones who did smiled, because that was the new standard. Not perfection, not profit, but truth. And as Jackson stood outside one of the newly certified locations a few months later, watching a young couple share a slice by the window, he knew the legacy was intact. The battle had been ugly, but the brand had survived. And more importantly, the soul had endured. All because one man took a bite and refused to swallow a lie. And just like that, what started with one suspicious slice of pie ended in a battle for integrity that rocked an entire brand to its core. Jackson Hart didn't just save Golden Hearth. He reminded the world that truth matters, even in something as simple as dessert. If this story moved you, made you think twice about what goes on behind the counter, or simply gave you a reason to believe in doing the right thing, then don't leave just yet. Hit that like button. Subscribe for more powerful true stories that dig deeper than headlines, and share this video with someone who still believes honesty is worth fighting for. Because the next story might be even bigger.